WuDon returned to the Grove of Whispers on the first day of the rainy season, and the grove remembered her. The harmattan had ended 3 days ago, the dry wind retreating northward, leaving the first tentative moisture. The air was thick with the sweetness of dry earth anticipating water, the mineral smell of laterite warming in sun, the organic undertone of root systems activating beneath the surface, the faint ozone of distant thunderheads building on the southern horizon. She could taste the coming rain at the back of her throat, iron and green things growing. She walked the path from the settlement alone. Samini had offered to accompany her, reinstated by Attinga's reformed circle with no formal apology, but with the quiet acknowledgement that his oath-breaking had been the most important act of custodianship any member had performed in living memory. He was busy now, training deep communion practitioners, managing the institutional politics the Restoration had created, spending his days in meetings where elders asked questions they had been trained for 30 years to never ask. He was also, WuDon suspected, giving her this moment alone because he understood what the grove meant to her. The path was familiar under her feet, packed laterite giving way to sandy soil, then the richer forest floor where the grove's canopy blocked enough sun to keep the ground soft year-round. The texture changed beneath her sandals with each step. She could feel the root lines strengthening as she approached, not through communion, but through her feet, a physical vibration in the earth that her permanently altered body registered as warmth rising through her soles. The grove was different, not the visible transformation of the crystallized groves, no amber light, no mineral wood, no transparent boundaries. The Grove of Whispers was one of the 43 that had dimmed but not gone dark during the crisis, strained but never severed, hurt but not destroyed. Now those voices were back, and they were not whispering. The baobab stood massive and patient, trunks wider than houses, their bark gray and wrinkled and scarred by centuries of weather, the particular scars of trees that had survived generations of harmattan heat and rainy season flooding, and the slow, patient violence of a climate that tested everything it touched. The shade trees rustled in the first breezes of the rainy season, their leaves carrying the dust of 6 dry months that the first rains would wash clean. The ground cover was greening, new shoots breaking through the dry season, crust with the stubborn urgency of life refusing to stay dormant. But the difference was in the register. The communion register, where the whispers had been thin, barely audible, requiring concentration to distinguish from background, they were now full, dense, layered. She could hear individual voices where before there had been only texture. The grove's communication was not a murmur. It was a chorus, each voice distinct, each carrying its own frequency, its own history, its own character. The whispers had names. WuDon pressed her palms to the earth at the grove's heart, the communion circle where she had been kneeling on the night the silence began. The laterite was warm, not sun-warm, system-warm. The root lines beneath the surface pulsing with a clean signal that heated the soil the way a heartbeat heats the body it sustains. Instant connection, no calibration needed, no 3-count breathing exercise, no graduated descent through depth levels. The communion opened like a door that recognized the hand on its handle. Her expanded range, the permanent gift of the convergence, treated this depth as baseline. What had been extraordinary was now ordinary. What had been the deepest dive of a lifetime was now the starting point. She could feel every grove, 47 nodes, each distinct, each singing its particular note in the network's chord. The Grove of Whispers was node 12, the 12th grove planted by the Zagale, its frequency tuned to a particular bandwidth that made it the most acoustically sensitive node in the network. A listening post. The grove's very name, Whispers, was not a metaphor. It was a design specification. The Zagale had built this grove to hear things the other groves could not. "Winaya," said the guardian through the boundary channel. The Frafra greeting, "Are you well?" delivered not in words but in frequency, the meaning arriving as feeling rather than sound. But the greeting was different from the guardian's usual communication. There was no urgency, no request, no crisis-driven contact. This was social. The guardian was greeting her the way one greets a friend. WuDon felt the greeting settle in her chest. Warmth. Recognition. The particular warmth of being known by something vast and ancient that had chosen to know her not because the system required it, but because the relationship mattered. "En winna." She replied through the channel. "I am well." The traditional response, delivered through the root lines with the same casual intimacy of two people passing each other in a village pathway. The guardian received it, acknowledged it, and the boundary channel held the residual warmth of an exchange that meant nothing strategically and everything relationally. The sweep continued. She checked the nodes, all 47. The 4 crystallized groves pulsed their amber beacons, Sunyani brightest, Nyariga's transformed sanctuary, the scholar's frequency now the strongest single point in the network. The other 3 crystallized groves had developed their own characteristics. One hummed at a frequency that attracted insects, so that the grove was always loud with the buzz of bees and beetles. Another had begun to produce a resin that smelled of camphor and rain. The third had grown new roots, visible, surface roots, in the geometric patterns of Zagale script. She surfaced after an hour, sat back on her heels. Her knees ached, the ordinary ache of a body in its early 20s, nothing magical, just joints protesting stillness the way joints always protested stillness. The morning light had shifted while she communed, moving from the pale gold of dawn to the warm amber of mid-morning, and the grove's shadows had shortened accordingly. Her hearing was recovering. Slowly. The persistent ringing from the convergence had faded from a scream to a tone, from a tone to a hum, from a hum to an intermittent buzz that came and went with the weather. Some frequencies had returned fully. She could hear birdsong now, the full range of it, the Hadada ibis's harsh call and the weaver bird's intricate chatter and the deep boom of a ground hornbill somewhere in the distant forest. Other frequencies remained muffled, voices in crowded rooms blurred together. Rain on a tin roof sounded like static. The cost persisted, but it was retreating week by week, the way bruises retreat slowly through stages, leaving behind a tenderness that served as reminder. She stood, stretched, touched the grandfather tree's bark with her fingertips, rough, deeply furrowed, warm with the sap that flowed through channels carved by centuries of growth. The bark smelled of old wood and rain, and the particular mineral scent of a tree whose roots reached down past soil and stone to the geological substrate where the Zagale's infrastructure hummed. The sap, where it beaded at a wound in the bark, was golden. Amber gold. The same color as the system's healthy glow. The tree's blood was the system's light. She walked back through the grove. The path was familiar and strange. The same trees, the same bends, the same clearing where she had practiced her first communion under Samini's guidance 2 years ago. But her perception had changed. She could feel the root lines beneath the path like veins beneath skin. She could sense the grove's awareness of her movement, not surveillance, not intelligence, but the simple mechanical registration of a system monitoring its own territory. She was walking through a living thing. The grove was not a collection of trees, it was an organ in a body. At the grove's edge, where the canopy thinned and the savanna began, she stopped. The settlement was visible across the open ground, mud brick compounds with thatched roofs, cooking smoke rising in thin columns, the distant sound of children and goats, and the rhythmic thump of a mortar and pestle. Ordinary life. The world that existed above and around and completely unaware of the system beneath it. The walk to the settlement took 15 minutes. The path crossed open grassland where the first green shoots were pushing through dry season crust, the earth cracking and reforming as moisture reached the surface. She could feel the root lines thinning as she moved away from the grove, the signal growing fainter, the warmth in the soil diminishing until the ground beneath her feet was just ground. Ordinary laterite, the edge of the system's reach. She entered the settlement, went to the communal kitchen. The cook, Azara, old and wide and fierce about portions, was stirring a pot of groundnut soup over a wood fire, the flames licking the blackened clay pot and sending the smell of roasted groundnuts and smoked fish and dried pepper into the humid air. The soup was thick, the groundnut paste giving it a rich, heavy body that clung to the stirring spoon in amber ribbons. "Sid," Azara said, not a suggestion. Azara did not make suggestions. She made declarations with the authority of a woman who had been feeding people for 30 years and had developed strong opinions about how thin people should and should not be. WuDon sat. Azara brought her a bowl of chuo smooth millet paste, freshly turned, and ladled groundnut soup over it with the generous hand of a cook who considered hunger a personal insult. The chuo was perfect. Dense, smooth, holding its shape in the bowl while the soup pooled around it like a mote of gold. The first bite was hot enough to make her eyes water, the pepper hitting the back of her throat with the particular sharp heat of the tiny red peppers that grew in the settlement's kitchen gardens. The groundnut flavor followed, deep, rich, earthy, the taste of the north. Home. She ate. The second bowl arrived without request. The earth takes what the body gives, Azara said, watching her eat with the satisfied expression of a woman whose prescriptions were being filled. You must give the body more. After the meal, she sat on the low bench outside the kitchen and watched the settlement move through its afternoon. Women carried water from the borehole, the basins balanced on their heads with the effortless grace of daily practice. Children chased each other between compounds, their laughter high and wild, and carrying the particular abandon of children who had been released from morning chores. An old man sat in the shade of his compound wall, weaving a basket with fingers that moved without looking, the raffia strands clicking softly as they interlocked. The sounds reached her through her damaged hearing, partially. The children's laughter was clear. The women's conversation as they passed was muddled. The basket weaving was silent to her, though she could see the old man's lips moving as he worked, probably singing the weaving song that weavers had sung for generations, the rhythm of the song matching the rhythm of the strands. This was what the system was for. Not emergencies, not convergences, not communion crises that tore the world open and demanded a young woman's hearing as the price of repair. This was what the Zagale had built their infrastructure to maintain: the ordinary world, the settlement, the kitchen, the children, the old man and his basket, the rain approaching from the south, the groundnut soup, the life. She pressed her palms against the bench, wood, sun-warmed, smooth with use. The root lines were not beneath her. She was outside the grove's range. But the echo of the morning's communion lingered in her body, a residual warmth that was not temperature but connection. The guardian's friendship, the grove's welcome, the network's chorus. And beneath it, the thing she carried like a stone in her pocket, present whenever her attention turned inward, the pulse from the deep substrate. She had felt it again during the morning's communion. Stronger than last Tuesday, more defined. The rhythmic signal from below the guardian, below the Zagale's architecture, from the geological foundation the system was built upon. A voice the system could not hear, a frequency WuDon's expanded communion could detect only because the convergence had pushed her range beyond the system's designed parameters. The Guardian had not commented on the pulse. When she had directed the Guardian's attention to it, the response had been the Zagale equivalent of a shrug, an acknowledgement of something below detection threshold, filed and forgotten. The Guardian could not hear it. The system could not register it. Only the listener who had been rebuilt by the convergence, whose communion range exceeded the system's design specifications, could feel the pulse that came from beneath the foundation. It was growing stronger, week by week, Tuesday by Tuesday, like something waking up. The rain arrived that afternoon, fat, warm drops hitting dry earth with the particular percussion of the first rain of the season. WuDon stood in it. Let the water run through her hair and down her face and soak her wrapper until the cloth clung heavy to her legs. The rain tasted of iron and dust and the beginning of things. The earth beneath her feet, outside the grove's range, ordinary laterite with no root line beneath it, drank the rain with the desperation of soil that had been dry for 6 months. Because it was Tuesday, and Tuesdays were what the system was built for. And the listener, who had heard the world scream and answered and survived and returned, was doing the only thing that mattered. She was listening to the grove, to the guardian, to the rain, and to the voice beneath the voice in the foundation beneath the foundation that was growing louder with every passing week. The grandfather tree's sap flowed gold in the grove behind her. The soil beneath the tree was warmer than the soil beneath her feet. Something was growing, something the system had not planted and could not identify. The listener noticed. The listener filed it. And the listener returned the following Tuesday to check again, because that was what Tuesdays were for.